morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Freethought Hour. Here we play. Yes, and we've actually got Tercia arriving at this moment. She's not ready yet. I can see she's still fiddling with her camera, and I'm not even sure whether she's been through makeup yet, and her camera's gone upside down. I'll tell you what, I'll bring on our guest, Tercia, and bring you on in a minute, okay? So welcome, Rob Palmer. How the devil are you?
I am just peachy keen. How are you doing?
We're okay, thank you. And Tercia is also okay. Look at her. She's the glamour of the show. Here she is. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much. Pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I'm not wearing my glasses. Let me just... Rob. And I have to apologize. You know, John has this saying, never have kids. I have 3. And that's 3 too many because everything was all set up. And then I went to visit my folks and I came back and I had kids.
Well, I had an outbreak of kids earlier today because I was booked to appear on the panel of an AAI webinar, and it'll be uploaded to the AAI channel one day soon, I guess. But I was on there with a load of luminaries, and it started at 2:00. So I had to do stuff with Jananda. And so it was the athletics track, and then it was into the nearby town to collect something that she'd ordered from a shop, and they didn't have any people behind the counter, and I got to be a nightmare. And then on the way home, the level crossing gate shut. I arrived at about 3 minutes past 2. So yes, my adage, never have kids, is working well.
Well,
Rob, how many do you have?
Yeah, in my younger days, when we had the choice, we were in an organization called No Kidding! ! It's an international organization for people who are child free. All right, not childless. They like the word free.
Yes,
we had a lot of good friends that way, and still have a lot of those people, and we never changed our mind. So.
Right.
Well.
Yeah.
I have to confess that I admire you for overriding the natural urge to procreate, because
mostly my wife's natural. Mostly it's the women who have that urge. I think. I think there's some men who really, really wanted kids, but mostly it's the woman who talks them into it if they're on the fence. That's my
Well, as a woman, I always wanted kids, and funny enough, my husband also wanted kids. In fact, we considered having 4. We stopped with 3, which and having said that never have kids, I would not exchange any one of the 3 any day. Although it's easier to have cats than
as I have mine right here. Hello, Peggy Sue. We have a refrigerator magnet that you can love cats just like kids, and you don't have to pay for college. So
absolutely.
Yeah, but there's all the vet's fees and the food and the.
Oh, it does not. Do you know how much college is in the U.S.? Oh my God.
Yeah.
John, I have 3 kids and 4 cats. There's no comparison.
Well, I've got, as you know, I've got 4 kids and no cats. And
that's why you don't know that cats are cheaper than kids.
Maybe, yeah. So, should we leave the subject of families and get on to the subject of skepticism?
Oh, is that what we're here to talk about? I thought we were going to be talking about no children.
I was having so much fun.
So, should we ask Rob to tell us how he got to be the Rob he is today?
Time and experiences, I guess. So, I grew up a Catholic, 12 years of Catholic school, and I am now an open atheist. So that didn't stick. I would guess I sometimes, I could describe myself as a recovered Catholic. I became a skeptic, I think, before I decided that I didn't believe in the religion anymore, at least in large part. I work for Recovering from Religion, and I think we're going to talk about that. And it's not an atheist organization, but it helps people leave religion who feel they've been damaged or hurt by it, or having serious doubts about it and don't want to be in it anymore.
So, Rob, sorry, I have to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
I do that. John will tell you. I have. So, firstly, I want to ask. I don't know if I should sympathize, but maybe not, because 12 years of Catholic school, on the one hand, I'm suspecting that it might have given you a very sound education. Am I right?
Well, my parents weren't particularly religious, but they sent me there because we lived in New York City. And I don't know if this is right or wrong. It was too long ago for me to know the truth. I was a kid, but they decided the public schools were absolutely atrocious, and they were going to pay money they didn't really have to give me a better education. So that is why they did that. And I do think it was a very good education.
That's a very important point that I also want to make about Catholic schools, because if one can be lucky enough, and I've never been through Catholic schools, but what I know about reading and listening to people who have been through Catholic school, if you're lucky enough to somehow not be abused by a nun or a priest in some psychological or physical way, then you should be getting a very good education. And my only experience, as my personal experience with Catholic school, I had music lessons with a nun in the local Catholic school, and I loved Sister Edith. I heard she passed recently. She grew to a ripe old age, and I must say that my experience with my music teacher, piano teacher, Sister Edith, was one of the factors that, in retrospect, probably led me to become an atheist and a skeptic. Because as a Reformed Calvinist, to get to know a Roman Catholic nun and have honest and open conversations with her, because I must confess that most of our time learning piano was, I could never stop talking. So she must have enjoyed my open, I don't know, maybe. But so that's the first thing. Catholic education, I think, is not necessarily a bad thing per se. And then please go into Recovering from Religion. Are you still working with them? And have you recovered? Or are you a recovered Catholic or recovered?
Yes, well, I always joke that I'm a recovered Catholic before I even heard of the organization Recovering from Religion. I heard about this organization talked about a lot just in my adult time, not when I was going to Catholic school or even for the decades after that. But the ACA shows, the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, and they'll often recommend calls to this organization, now my organization, to callers for a more in-depth discussion of their problem that they can just get by calling into a talk show. Also the goal of the talk shows isn't the same as we are. We're there to help people. We're not here to convince them they're wrong. Most people don't call into us to argue. They've already decided there's a problem with their religion. They've been hurt by it or otherwise, and they're seeking community or help. And we do that. But I had an easier recovery from religion than I think most people, at least that I encounter, do. And partly because of the Catholicism didn't really, it wasn't a lot of preaching about hellfire and brimstone. You're going to hell, right? I figured if I didn't kill somebody, I'm not going to hell. Whereas a lot of evangelical Christians are always in angst about they do one thing wrong and they're going to hell.
Yeah.
You'd be on the wrong side of it. And I didn't, never really thought much about the hell thing. But so many people, that's the reason they can't leave Christianity, because even though they've intellectually decided the dogma makes no sense, the Bible's full of contradictions, they were programmed as a child with the belief in hell, and they can't let that go. What if I'm wrong? What if I say I'm an atheist and now I'm going to be tortured forever by the God which supposedly loves me?
Do you think, Rob, that the idea of confession helps Catholics to escape? Because many Catholics Catholics find it very easy to be in practice non-religious. Do you
Probably, but I have to say this, Teresa. So the actual reason I deconverted fully, I was a skeptic. I already didn't believe anything in the Old Testament. Again, not that they really preached a lot of that in Catholic school nor in Catholic service. They didn't force you to believe in the literal Eden and the flood and all that like evangelical Christians do. All of my extended family, when I was a mid-teenager, maybe 15, 16, converted to evangelical Christianity, except for my immediate family, my parents and my 2 siblings and mine. And so now I got to experience another form of Christianity up close and personal, which was very different. And I go,
yeah,
wait a minute, they're using the same Bible and they're sure they can raise the dead and heal the sick and speak in tongues.
Yeah.
Why are Catholics not telling me this? And then I just decided, it took a while, but okay, it's all nonsense. That's kind of how I got out of it.
Uh-huh.
But are you when do you act as a guide or a
So Recovering from Religion has a bunch of services. The one that's more famous because it's the one that gets talked about on other YouTube videos and podcasts is the helpline. We have a chat or a talk, so you can call or chat in from anywhere in the world, either with a direct phone number from our website, recoveringfromreligion.org, or we have a web button you can push if there's no number in your area, and you could decide, I want to chat. You can even schedule a call back or a chat back if no one picks up the line, if you're not available right then. So that's how I first got involved with them. I've been doing that since the pandemic started, which is when I joined the organization. I went into all sorts of things. We do so many things that even if people don't like to directly interface with people and that's not their thing, there's so many other things you can do to help other people. I branched off into training other agents, even interviewing prospective agents who people who signed up to volunteer. I would then, see if they were appropriate. As I said, training other agents. We have a support group sessions. I didn't get involved with that, but people can join the 60-something support groups across the world. Most of them are virtual. We have an online community where there are moderated chats, and I do help with that. That's another thing people do. And when the pandemic started, pretty much soon after it, we started a weekly live Zoom session, which gets recorded and put up on YouTube later, where people can join in, and we have a speaker, either something about atheism, free thinking, critical thinking, psychology. I've given talks on certain subjects. I've invited friends who are skeptics to give talks on how we know ghosts aren't probably real. The one that just went up yesterday was the famous mentalist Mark Edward, who used to work in the psychic industry to show that these people are not legitimate. We've had Susan Gerbic, who you've had on your show, to do a talk. So we've had scientists who I've invited on, all sorts of talks, and it's great. Monday, it's difficult for people in the UK, but for people who are night owls or watching elsewhere. I guess South Africa is the same time zone as the UK. Is that true? 1 hour or so?
We are 2 hours behind or ahead. I'm not sure, but ahead. But in most of in when they have daylight saving time, we are 1 hour.
So it would be difficult for people from across the pond from the US to join, because it starts at 8 o'clock Eastern time US. But we record the sessions, and they're all on our YouTube channel, Recovering from Religion. There's about 180 of those episodes there now, and it's wide range of things. A lot of discussion on religious trauma syndrome, on how purity culture affects people badly when they're in religion. Anyway, it's a good resource to check out.
Absolutely. And we've also had Darrell Ray on this show too.
Oh, I did not. Fantastic. Yes. He started the organization as he's still the president.
Yes.
And that was before my time. So it's one of the things I regret but
it's in the archive. You can still watch it. It's in the archive.
He's a psychologist who, was seeing clients, as I recall the story, who would tell him they saw another therapist. And then the therapist, after a while, after hearing all the problems, said, okay, now I know how to solve your problems. Let's open Genesis,
Yes.
Let's pray about it.
It's so unprofessional.
I heard him tell the story, and I go, the therapist wouldn't do that. And I have had so many callers directly tell me that too. So we have a project called the Secular Therapy Project, which we screen people that they're secular, and they're licensed, and also they don't use crystal healing and things like that. And then they get in our organization. So we point people to that organization if they need professional help.
Rob, I want to ask, with your Catholic schooling, what did you get? Did you do any post-school qualifications? And tell us about that. I interrupted you when you were talking about how you became the Rob that you are today. So we had Kenneth Daniels who told us that he was a graduate of a Christian engineering school, which we found very funny.
I have never heard of that.
So
I have never even heard of that. That's interesting.
Well, watch that episode. Watch our episode with Kenneth Daniels. He's a deconverted former missionary who wrote Why I Believed. And when he told us about it, he said he studied as an engineer at a Christian
Yes.
So he did Christian engineering. So what did you do?
So I am an engineer. I'm a mechanical aerospace engineer. And
how did I guess that?
What I don't know. It's like
it must be because I'm married to a mechanical engineer. I can suss you out, I can spot you at a mile.
So, well, I guess one of the things I was always science minded. Like I got a telescope when I was, a little kid, and I was onto that. And I never believed any of the nonsense of the Old Testament stories, and that was not even promoted that I recall. Anyway, I don't remember. Oh, that's not right. I don't remember priests talking about that like it was real. So I was kind of already, had a scientific, skeptical mindset about things, but I did believe in alien visitation and ghosts and maybe Ouija boards and mediums, because why not? That's what was all over television. You go to the library and you get books on the subject. There was nothing that I came across that said this was wrong. So this was science. This was right. Right. So sometime in my mid-teens, I found a magazine called the Skeptical Inquirer, which was writing on the science side of those things. And I said, oh, wow, there's no Loch Ness Monster. I've heard that people in the UK don't actually believe, but people in America do. And then there's no Bigfoot, and there's likely no aliens visiting Earth. And it's like, the Shroud of Turin isn't even real. So it's like, oh, wow. That pushed me over the edge to actually say, okay, none of this is real. I don't even believe in the Trinity anymore. Although they weren't talking about the religious things, but it kind of all melds. If you're a skeptic and become a rational thinker about these things, it's kind of hard, from my perception, to still believe in taking things on faith. So I went into engineering, and I did that till I retired, just when the pandemic started. I was not involved very much in anything else. I didn't know there was an active skeptical movement even until maybe 3 or 4 years before that. And then I started doing podcasts, and I found The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe by searching the term universe.
Have you been a guest on this show before?
I have not, and I'm mad about that, because I've interviewed Jay Novella several times for my column, and I actually, to drop names, I had dinner with them and their family once, but I was never a guest.
Well, there's still some. You might still be. I mean, one never knows. Anything can happen, I want to ask you, Rob.
We'll put in a good word for you.
Would you do the same for us, please?
Sure. So I would say I found them, and then I found them talking about other podcasts. I found a podcast which I now have contributed to somewhat, the Skeptic Zone from Australia. And they had interviewed Susan Gerbic, who was talking about the Guerrilla Skeptics on Wikipedia, which was a team set to promote scientific rationalism on that encyclopedia. And I looked it up, and I found paranormal people lambasting it. Like, how dare these people tell us that astrology is not true? And that made me join them. So that's how I became a skeptical activist.
So can we tell our audience that we're about 50% UK audience and 50% US audience? So people in the UK may not know what Guerrilla Skeptics on Wikipedia actually are or do. Could you tell us?
Yes. So Susan Gerbic went on a cruise as she found her own interest in the skeptical movement. I think this was about 2010. And there was a talk given by another skeptic about Wikipedia, which was like around a little bit by then. And it was an up and coming thing, and people were starting to rely on it more and more. And it had become such an important resource that guy's talk was, can't remember who that was now, unfortunately, but that guy's talk was, we need to figure out how to use this resource to put the right information on there so that people don't go to the homeopath page and it says homeopathy is true science or astrology really works. And she, in a few years, started to try to edit Wikipedia to do that and learned how to do it. And then she decided, I need a group of people to help me. So she formed a team she humorously called the Guerrilla Skeptics. Guerrilla as in fighters, not the ape.
Oh, can you so as a language teacher, as an English literature and language teacher, it's GUER, not the
GORILA, Guerrilla, right? GUERRILL.
I'm going to clip that, Tercy. I'm going to clip you doing this.
So as a joke, our logo actually is King Kong fighting off the airplanes on top of the World Trade Center. And on the airplane wings, it says something like paranormal homeopathy, something like that.
Yes.
It's a brilliant pun. I mean, I love puns.
So in a nutshell, the idea is that you put Wikipedia right.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. And the thing is, we're a small group. Frankly, we're 150 actual agents. Maybe 100 of those are active at when people come and go. Right. We're a drop in the bucket on Wikipedia. And we can talk about how we have been blamed. Like I talked about, I found, sites blaming us. It has just hit the fan the last month because of the whole UFO thing. Them blaming.
I've been following that. Because I follow Susan, and I've been following that. Yep.
So my article where I interviewed Susan for about an hour and wrote up was just submitted yesterday. So it's going to be published this week, all about that topic specifically. Peggy Sue, stop meowing so loud.
So while you're talking to your cat, while you're talking to your cat, I'm going to show that clip that Tercia was talking about with the Christian engineer.
So there was a gap in between in Arkansas when my dad went to a Christian engineering school.
Okay,
hang on. A Christian engineering school?
Well,
what do they engineer? Crosses?
Well, so, I've never heard of that concept in specific, but I will tell you, as a professional engineer, I worked with a lot of people, even more senior than myself, who were Christians and engineers. And they had no problem with leaving. Noah's flood happened.
Oh, yes.
And yet, designing the software to fire satellite, missiles to hit satellites.
Yeah, it's a peculiarly American thing. We
don't know about that.
No, John, it isn't. I have to disagree with you, and the reason I vehemently disagree, it's not an American thing. Americans are as human, believe it or not, as the rest of us. It's a human thing.
Hang on. You find me a British university that has Christian in its name.
Well, that may be a one-of anecdote.
I'll grant you that. I'll grant you that. But the concept of compartmentalizing. But I'll grant you that. But
by the way,
Rob, I wanted.
Let me say this. I watched The Crown, and the leader of your country is ordained by God. So
Not only that, I don't know whether you visited the UK, but if you do, I recommend you go to, I think it's Hereford Cathedral, because under a glass plate there is a family tree of the royal family, right? And you can go back through, all the different monarchs, the House of Windsor, the House of, I can't remember the name of the houses now, but there's Tudor, there's other houses, and right at the bottom is God.
Oh no!
Of course, yes. It was it? Is it the Immaculate Conception branch?
Yes,
or which branch?
Yes.
But Rob and John, something that I find very fascinating. In fact, I find skepticism and rationalism more important than atheism, because anybody can be a skeptic. Even Christians can be skeptic, and just because you're an atheist doesn't mean that you're a rationalist.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that you are irrational. We all hold certain irrational beliefs. I think the main distinction is whether one is able to recognize that one might be adhering to irrational beliefs. And then skepticism to me is, if I have to define it, it's the acquired and intentional attempt at always examining one's own beliefs for any marks of irrationality. And I love asking people what irrational beliefs they might still hold and held in the past. So I, for example, besides being a devout Christian, although nowadays when I think back, I think when somebody accuses me of not ever being a real Christian, they might be right.
No true Scotsman.
Well, yes. I would now. I at that time I never thought too hard about it, but I do know, and I have proof of that. I was an adherent to homeopathy. I went to chiropractors, and it took the internet and acquiring knowledge about things that I never had knowledge of to realize, geez, I was probably wrong about this. And I think and I'd like to hear your opinion about this. I think the most important task that we have as skeptics and rationalists is to make people comfortable with the idea of being wrong, because being wrong feels exactly like being right. And we have to be open to that idea constantly and be able to, and that's the thing that I think most people find most uncomfortable, is the idea that you could be wrong. And that
I wouldn't know that, Tarsia, because I've never been wrong about anything. So
oh yes, of course, but you're an engineer. I mean, I'm married to an engineer. You are never wrong, except when you're married to me. Then I'll tell you exactly when you've been wrong.
I actually have a mug my wife got me, who's not an engineer, and it says, never doubt the word of an engineer on any subject, something like that. Because she thinks that's what I would say, which is not true.
What is your wife? What is your wife's training? What is she in the?
So she's a social worker, actually therapist for the last 30 something.
Okay, I want to say that is so interesting, and I'd love to see some research about this. This is just a side topic, but do you know how often I find that engineers marry people in the humanities? And we had a lot of friend couples who were exactly,
I knew them because they were an engineer working with them, and it turned out their wife, or vice versa. My wife would know somebody because they're a social worker, and their husband happened to be an engineer. We'd get together on dates, and the women would talk, in what the men perceived as gibberish, because those all acronyms that we'd never heard of, and then we would do the same thing about engineering acronyms. It's like.
So this may be more of a sex difference than an engineer versus non-engineer difference, because of course traditionally when you came to choose, the girls didn't choose the dirty subjects, did they?
Well, I as an engineer in when did I start? 1980-ish, 1988, 1981. There was not one woman in the mechanical engineering department where I worked. Right, at an aerospace place. My sister was one of the very first. So she followed her brother going to get an engineering degree and got hired at the same place. And it was very unusual. It was a woman engineer. Now, there were women in the other departments, but not in the mechanical engineering department. That's right. Because most mechanical engineers I know became mechanical engineers because they like to take cars apart. And fathers don't teach their daughters that.
Yes, yes. It's terrible, really, because STEM is still blighted by a sex bias towards men. We want more women.
Although then when I went into computer engineering, much later, I transitioned. Pretty much equal mix, because you didn't have that issue where you became interested in the subject because of something your father taught you was a masculine thing to do.
No, because they didn't have computers. Yeah,
right. That's right.
Yep.
I worked that out. So there you go. We've got a couple of people, Brian and James. Thanks for joining in with us, Brian and James. We've got a discussion going here, bit of an argument over what sort of colleges we have in the UK and the history of secularism and all that nonsense.
I have to put on my, it's just terrible getting older. So I have these bloody varifocals. So when I want to read the comments, I have to put on my glasses and just go like that. And then I have to take them off to see this. So Rob, tell us about. You say that you became involved with freedom from religion during the pandemic.
Recovering from religion. So I used to do that when I answered the helpline when I first started. It's a common.
Yes, it's very confusing. FRF
and FNR is all different orders. Yeah.
Yes. So we've also had Dan Barker from that one as well on our show.
I've never met him. So what was your question, Teresa? Sorry.
I'm interested to know whether you at Recovering from Religion keep any statistics, because I would like to know if you do keep statistics at all, and whether you can see an increase in call volumes, or whether you saw an increase since the pandemic, when people became cut off from their religious communities to a certain extent. So I'm keen to hear what you have to say about that. So as a humanities person.
Once a year, the management team meets. They have an all-hands meeting. Anyone can attend and watch. Each department director reports on things like that. And I have seen this. I don't have copies, but I have seen the statistics where the person in charge of the helpline would report that. And I do remember things drastically going up as the pandemic increased. And then afterwards, it dropped off. And we were wondering, what's the reason? And people, probably because of the pandemic is over, wondering if we were doing something wrong or that just had to happen because we had a sort of unnatural spike. But so I started as a helpline agent because of the pandemic. I actually retired at that point. I felt my office environment was not safe, frankly. And I was close to retirement anyway. So I did. And I got a lot of free time. Oh, I've always heard about that Recovering from Religion. Let me give them a try. And I was trained pretty quickly. And then I became a helpline agent. So probably April or May of the year the pandemic started in March, I was a helpline agent. And many of the calls initially were about something to do with the pandemic and religion, right? And that was surprising to me. A lot, and John's going to lambast the United States again about this being uniquely in this problem. But the problems became, I stepped out of religion. I went to get a vaccine because I believe in science, and my family says the blood of Jesus is going to protect me, and they want me to come to a party. I'm not coming to a party. They're not even wearing masks. That became a large part of the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I can resonate with that. So South Africa is very similar to the United States in many ways. We're about the same age. We were colonized about the same time by the same colonizers. We didn't have a war. Well, I suppose we did have eventually a war of sort of semi-independent. Yes, you go. But the parallels, but I often find that I can resonate with what happens in the United States, because we also have a resurgence of evangelical Christianity, and we have exactly the same. And during the pandemic, we had exactly the same thing.
And spiritualism too, I believe. Spiritualism.
You mean the resurgence of spiritualism because of the pandemic, John?
And animism, the African religions and beliefs.
Oh, that wasn't a resurgence. I mean, that was just always there. I mean, that has never disappeared. And I don't think the pandemic has done anything, because we have such a poor policing in our country. In the townships, people just sort of continued to go about their ways. There was no law enforcement as far as social distancing, because it's not possible in shanty towns and very poor socioeconomic circumstances. But I wonder, it would be interesting now. We basically 2 years past the pandemic and past lockdowns, whether people have reconnected with the sense of community that religion gives them. Because I think, and Rob, you will be able to talk to this as a somebody who takes people through their deconversion or deconstruction of their faith. I think one of the worst things that religion has done is to monopolize the sense of community that we as humans have, and that the only way to have community in many environments, in my country, for example, if you don't belong to a church, it's very difficult to have a sense of community. And if you have any sense of social responsibility, your options are a political party or a church.
Yeah, Tercia, that's absolutely true. So if I had to categorize the main reasons people call recovering from religion, there's several main categories. One is I've lost my community, or I am afraid to open my mouth because I know I will lose my community. And the community might mean your wife.
Shunning. Yes, a terrible thing.
Right. I mean, there have been people that are like Jehovah's Witnesses are probably one of the worst at that. There's an official shunning. And if anyone talks to you, then they're shunned too, and they're out of the. And by the way, you might still believe the doctrine. You might just have had a problem with something else. Like I've had calls from people who have a problem with the minister believing they're sexually abusing children. That doesn't mean they necessarily don't believe anything in the Bible or in the specific books, associated with Jehovah's Witnesses. So they still believe the apocalypse is going to happen, and they're going to be destroyed if they get kicked out of the community instead of going on and living. So that's a big problem. Yeah, and it's lesser degree other religions for sure too. Mormonism is not officially shunning people, but that happens. And just generally, depending on people's culture and their religion, Islam is one of the worst because it's a death penalty in some countries.
Yep.
I can't wait for the apocalypse, as long as it's just the rapture. All the theists disappear up into the sky. Leave us alone.
I worked with a fundamentalist who believed that was going to happen, and I would never get in a car with her because she had a bumper sticker which said, "In case of rapture, this vehicle will be unoccupied." I said, "Well, if I'm in the passenger seat, I'm in trouble."
You must make sure that the roof light is open. So I must tell you this. I had a knock on the door a couple of days ago, and I went downstairs because this studio is upstairs, and there was a man there who had an idiotic grin on his face, and he said something like, "Have you heard the truth?" or "Have you heard the good word?" And he was selling Christianity.
Do you know what religion it was? Did you get to that point?
No. I just told him to go away. Basically, I said, "Listen, you're talking to the executive president of Atheism UK. I suggest we don't waste any more of each other's time."
You lost an opportunity. I had Jehovah's Witnesses come, and I kept them for 45 minutes because that was 45 minutes less they can spend trying to talk my neighbors into it.
Yeah, but you had 45 minutes. I was busy.
I want to ask you, what would you do if what would Jesus do? But not what would Jesus do? What would Rob Palmer do? You've partially answered. If the Jehovah's Witnesses knocked at your door tonight.
So they had an iPad with the Bible on it, and I guess the other books, whatever Jehovah's Witnesses use, I forget. But I did street epistemology on them. Have you guys ever had Anthony Magdabasco or talked about street epistemology?
We should get him, John. We should get him. I have watched so many videos that I want to actually try to do street epistemology within the next couple of weeks. I want to get my tech ready, and I need my GoPro because I've been practicing how to do it, and it's a treat. But I have to say, one needs a particular mindset. What would you say, Rob, is the key mindset?
It's difficult. It's one of the things they encourage us to learn to deal with people. And we actually have in our online community, which I mentioned before, we have one of the chat areas is practice street epistemology. Anthony Magnabosco, who's one of the more famous practitioners, is involved with our organization. He interviewed me when I signed up to be an agent. That was funny because it's like all I knew was a guy named Anthony was going to call me at a time, and no idea. I just gave it away, told you who it was, but some random person. And I immediately recognized his voice because I've listened to 100 hours of his video. And I said, "Is your last name Magnabosco?" And he said something like, "Oh my God, I have to get a voice changer. I can't do this anymore. People ask me questions, and I have very limited time to talk to you, so I couldn't." But he actually did one of the RFRX Monday meeting segments, which is up on our channel, telling all about street epistemology. We're encouraged to learn that, and I did practice that reasonably. I think it's hard to do it right. It does take practice. So I probably actually sucked if Anthony was watching it. But I did that with the two people who came to my door. And well, why do you say it's a good book? And then they looked up something because it says it. Isn't that circular reasoning? Wouldn't a Muslim say the Quran is the good book? And it was like, oh, and when they left, they said, we'll have to come back. We've never had such an interesting conversation.
I think that's a line that they taught internationally, because whenever I've had them around, they said exactly the same. In fact, I relocated to a different neighborhood in the same town about 5 years ago, and as far as I know, I'm the only person who was shunned by the Jehovah's Witnesses because they wouldn't come near our street block even. My neighbors loved it. Of course, I ran out and shouted, come, and they just pretended not to see me because...
I think you might be right, Tercia. I have since heard they have a no-knock list, and I think those people really put me down in the no-knock list because no one has come back. It's been about 2 years.
Yep, they came last year. Since we've relocated, was the first time. And I wonder if they're going to come back. I took their numbers because I'd actually like to interview them again. But to me, the most difficult, the most difficult aspect about street epistemology is to maintain a neutral tone of voice, because I'm a natural sarcastic person. I'm actually quite mean, and I'm very honest, which means that my face can't lie and my voice can't lie. So I have to train myself to really not be sarcastic in the way I ask questions. To me, that's the most difficult aspect of street epistemology. And I have to confess.
If you're a poker player, it's very easy.
Well, I'm not.
It might be good training.
I can't hide anything. I carry my entire 4 rooms of my heart and my lungs and everything I carry right up on my sleeve. I mean, I can't even lie on the bloody internet. So it's very difficult. That to me is the most difficult aspect, to not be condescending and not to have this what the fuck expression on my face off. And,
occasionally I have a conversation with somebody on the line and they're struggling with something. And, I'm actually agreeing with them. There's, problem with, the Bible here. It says, by the way, we get a lot of people calling who are not straight, right? Either gay, trans, non-binary, much more than the normal population, I would imagine, by a factor of 10. And it first it surprised me. And then I started realizing why that is. It's because, if you're sitting in an environment, in a church, in a mosque, in a temple, where they're telling you that you're damaged because of your, that, you got a bigger reason to leave than your average person. And they do. So that's a big thing. But anyway, so I'm talking to somebody about whatever it is got them to leave their religion, and I'm agreeing with it. It might be because they're gay or whatever. And then they say something about, I've been seeing an astrologer and they're telling me this, and I'm going, oh, don't say anything. This is not the time to argue that. That's very hard. There was a person the other day calling about flat Earth. It's just, well, if we know the Bible is wrong, how do we know that the Earth is a sphere? We're just a rock going through space. There's no proof of that. It's like, oh.
Yeah, these are people who haven't ever flown in an aircraft and looked down, or discovered that the time when they arrive is different from the time when they left.
John, I I'd like to hear Rob's opinion on this as well. So I was never good at maths. I dropped science and
you guys can't even say the word correctly on your side of the pond.
Well, you only have one math.
That's right.
We have lots.
That's right. It's singular. Yeah, my Canadian friend says it that way too, and she's a maths teacher. It's like it bugs me.
Well, and then just to add on to it, I'm actually not a native English speaker. My mother tongue is actually Afrikaans, so that makes it even worse. So please forgive me for all the language mistakes. But I found it particularly difficult, still to this day, to communicate about the more hard science topics. And I trained myself in the past 5 or 10 years by watching many science videos. And the one thing I have to constantly remind myself of is that anybody in this world, and I think that goes for most countries, John, I don't know if you want to Google this, I stand corrected, but if you have a degree as a qualification, then you are probably in the top 1 to 2% of the world's population. And if you have a second degree, like an honors degree, I don't know, the degree system in the US works a little bit different. The UK and South Africa is more similar.
It's still bachelor's, master's, PhD, I think.
Okay, well, if you have a bachelor's degree, then you are, let's make it the top 5% of the world's population. And we must never forget that all of us live in our own echo chamber to a greater or lesser extent, because, you know, birds of a feather flock together. And I work with, I often rub shoulders and I teach children and people and their parents who are the most decent people. They are salt of the earth, but they will never have a bachelor's degree. Most people that I rub shoulders with in my day-to-day life as I move outside of my household and my immediate circle of friends, they probably never finished high school, and they are productive and important members of society.
Sure.
And what I find is that as a teacher who works with people where I am in many respects intellectually, and I've been accused of intellectual I've been accused of being an intellectual snob in the past, and I probably am without intent. But we must never forget that people with a lesser education are at a disadvantage, and it's not due to their own fault. And I feel that our duty as skeptics and rationalists is to do whatever we can, in whatever way we can, to make people understand that knowledge is, in this day and age, knowledge is there for everybody. You just have to be curious enough, and you just have to spend enough time. And that's the key message that I would like to put out there.
Have you heard of Melanie Tresick King?
No, I haven't.
John, I would suggest you have her on the show. So she has just arrived on the skeptic scene. She did a Sunday paper talk 2 CSICons ago, and this last year she was a featured speaker. She actually went to New Zealand conference and spoke, and Australian conference. And she's let's see, she's got a degree in biology and she teaches biology. And what she decided to do was revamp her course in her school, let her do it, and then it goes. Now she tells other schools how to do this, and it's basically, you know, teach how you decide what's true rather than facts. So teach thinking rather than facts. She decided she was wasting her time teaching facts about biology and cellular evolution to people who it was a secondary. They weren't going to become doctors. It was just because they had to take a science degree. They're not going to remember any of it. But if you teach them how we know these things.
Exactly.
That's more important. Her website her website is Thinking is Power. Don't
teach what to think, teach how to think.
There you go. Yeah, and very important. I see a lot of people online now realizing that's true independently of Melanie, but she's got a really good website. She's really out there and doing this. And I think it's a fantastic idea and the right idea, because as you said, you know, we have many computers in our pockets with the information of the entire planet. And yet, you know, if you don't know how to think, you're going to believe the world is flat and homeopathy is real.
And you know, if I think of where I work every day, so I'm a teacher of say grade 6, so it's 12-year-olds to maybe 16-year-olds, and the average South African school kid is mostly immersed in Instagram and TikTok. And we need to understand that they are not stupid, because ignorance is not the same as as being of inferior intellect, whatever intellect might refer to.
Here's my take on this. I think that there's no shame in being ignorant. I know nothing about, what should we say, fly fishing, and that's not shameful. It doesn't. It's just because it hasn't come across my desk, if you like. But what is shameful is willful ignorance, where you've had an opportunity to learn good stuff and you've refused it.
But John, most people don't even know what there is to learn. And I think, so I'm talking from this perspective of a teacher who works with teenagers. And I was the quintessential nerdy teenager. So I'm not the norm. I'm a little bit broken, like all 4 of my cats. So, and to me, the greatest mind shift that I'm still engaged with every single day is to meet people where they're at. And Rob, I want you to come in here. I think that is the greatest challenge for skeptics and for rationalists, to unlearn what we know. And when that person says, "Oh, I just saw my astrologer yesterday," to not go, "What the fuck?" But
I was on vacation last month, and there were 3 girls lying on the beach chatting about, one person was, "Oh, don't see that boy. He's a Virgo, and that's not going to work with your star sign." And so 2 of them one said that, the other one agreed. The other one said, "No, astrology is not real." And I wanted to go and hug her. My wife would not have liked that, so I didn't get involved with the conversation at all. But like, but then there was another argument among them, like 5 minutes later, about something about the girl has ear pressure problems when she flies. And the same one who was believing in astrology also said, "Oh, you have to sit in the front of the plane because the pressure is lower there." And the same girl said, "No, that's not true. Where'd you get that?" So it was like, oh, I wanted to sign that person up as a skeptic. Like, she had the right idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. When people ask me what my star sign is, I always say it's Cygnus, because Cygnus is an astronomical constellation, but not an astrological one.
And I'm sure they all understand that, right, John?
I doubt it. It amuses me.
I am proud to say that not that long ago, well, no, about 20, 25 years ago, I actually bought myself a book about astrology because it fascinated me. And what I can also say is that what got me into skepticism, which I only realized now, it took 30 years, but we had a book in my house when I was a child that Lost Links, and it was about all these mysterious things like the Loch Ness Monster and alien abductions and unsolved crimes, and paradoxically, reading that and being prompted to know about these things later in my life enabled me to become a skeptic, because I had to reconsider things and ask myself if I believe this, but I don't believe that. But in fact, there's no difference between these 2 beliefs. So either they both wrong, they can't both be right at the same time. So, but they can both be wrong. And that was really important. I mean, I was an adherent of Ancient Aliens, Rob. So if I could have become a skeptic, then anybody can become a skeptic, because I'm really not the smartest person.
No, so that was my big thing. And in fact, I've gotten really heavily into this, debunking the UFO stuff recently. And everyone I talked to who's into that on the skeptic side was also a believer as a young person, as I was.
Hmm.
In fact, finding a specific book about aliens is what got me that, oh my God, they're lying about this.
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder what else is wrong with what I'm reading about paranormal stuff. Yeah, that was a specific UFO book. Who did that? Oh, I wanted to mention before, as you're saying, Terzia, about getting the information out to people, so that's one of the reasons that the Guerrilla Skeptics Project is so important, because it puts information on Wikipedia. And it is like one of the most visited websites in the entire world, maybe behind TikTok now, I don't know, but close. And because if someone Googles something, usually the first hit is Wikipedia, and you go there. That's a very important project to get the correct information out to people. Now, if you're already a believer in something, you're going to say, oh, this is nonsense, I don't believe you. But if you're on the fence, or your friend just told you to look this up because it's true, and you find, no, science says this is BS, you're more likely not to fall down that rabbit hole and believe it. So that's an important thing.
Yeah.
So your article? You mentioned your article. You wrote an article that will be launching tomorrow about guerrilla skeptics, because I think this is really important to get out there, and I'd like to make a little bit of a hoo-ha about it.
So I don't think I mentioned yet. So in 2016, I wrote an article about the Guerrilla Skeptics. I sent it into Skeptical Inquirer magazine, which is the equivalent of The Skeptic, right, in the UK. And it's the largest organization of skeptics, I believe. It's run by the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. And they published it, and they liked it so much, they asked me to come on as a column writer. And they gave me a column, which I named The Well-Known Skeptic, facetiously at the time. And I've been writing articles for them ever since then. I've gotten about 65 or so published, including video interviews with scientists and skeptics. And the one I just submitted yesterday, so it won't go out for at least a week probably, is about the latest claims by ufologists that the guerrilla skeptics are being paid by the US government to manipulate Wikipedia and hide the truth that we have crashed aliens.
Oh, but of course, I mean, it's absolutely true. I know you have. I mean, you're hiding all this information. So
we can hear the alien cat in your background.
Absolutely. Oh, Rob, sorry, I have to ask you something very, just as an aside. Did I email you a couple months ago when I published in the Skeptical Inquirer online about my undercover visit to Sangoma? Are you? I wonder if you, so. I have corresponded.
I don't remember. I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
Maybe I'm having a Mandela effect moment. I'll get your details from John, because I published my ever published article, first ever, was about why I'm a skeptic, and so I went to see a traditional healer.
I read that. I did read that article. Wow.
Okay, yeah.
You've met the author of it now. Yes. So on the subject of details, is there any chance you could give us some interesting contacts? Because we'd love to get Melanie Tresek-King on the show, and it's very difficult, as we were saying before we started going out, that most people are hard to contact, especially the women ones, They don't let their contact details go out easily. I wonder why.
I wonder why too. I mean, I'm not like that.
So you might be able to help us drum up some victims. I mean, guests, Rob.
I'm sure I can do that. Yeah, I've had pretty much success with getting people involved with the skeptical movement, and specifically with the Center for Inquiry and CSI to be speakers for Recovering from Religion. The last 6 or 7 months, I've become an official co-host of their Monday meeting, and they mostly have psychologists and people talking about religious trauma syndrome. And I thought I had done some talks on critical thinking and how psychics aren't real. And I started to invite my contacts from there on, and that's been a great boost, I think, in interest, because it's not always the same kind of subject, and also it's things that these people normally wouldn't come across because they're not looking for that kind of information.
Wonderful. So I'm sorry, but I'm always very strict about the timing of this show, because it's called the Freethought Hour, and I called it that using my free will.
If you have,
which I don't believe in. Did you watch that? Rob, from now on, John, I'm going to ask this as a closing or opening question at every one of our episodes. Do you believe that we have free will?
I've listened to a lot of debates on the subject and people arguing back and forth, and I also don't really know, and I don't care, because it seems like you have, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's convincing enough, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
We should have a debate on that one day.
On that note, Rob, thank you very much. Tercia, thank you for your help as usual. Wonderful stuff. And now it's time to say goodbye.
Goodbye, folks. It's been fun. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you so much, Rob.